Morning, everybody. Welcome to PlaceTech Talks Retail and Leisure. I hope you enjoyed your spot of networking in the other room. We've got a great lineup of speakers for our two panels this morning to take the pulse of retail and leisure, property, and explore the trends reshaping this sector for today's consumer. Thank you for joining us. A huge thanks to our wonderful partners, Bruntwood Works and Morecom. We're going to dive straight into the first panel now. So if our first panelists want to pop their cameras on, please. I'll do a quick once round and ask people just to introduce yourselves, who you are, where you're from, what you do. We are still waiting for one panelist having trouble getting his tech sorted, but we shall get underway. Brad, can I start with you?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Brad Miller. I'm Managing Director of Mago, which is Manchester Airports Group omnichannel. So I look after the digital side of the business.
Thank you. And Andrea?
Morning, everyone. My name is Andrea George. I am the Director of Town Centres and Consumer Brands at Bruntwood Works. And I'll be talking to you today about our repositioning of town centres and our consumer brands and how tech has been involved in those.
Lovely, thanks very much. Michelle?
Morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Buxton, CEO and founder of Toolbox Group, of which Morecom is one of our platforms. Morecom is a community engagement platform across the built environment.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Brad, if I start with you, tell us how Mago began, how long that division has been going, and some of the things that you've been working on so far, please.
Okay. The real embryonic start was all to do with a shift away from people turning up and selecting a short stay, a mid stay, or a long stay car park. And prior to everything going online and having the ability to pre-book, that was how people were making their decisions about how much they'd like to spend on their car parking. We started to see a shift in the market in that, and so we started dynamically pricing our products about 12 to 13, maybe 14 years ago. As we started to become more sophisticated and develop our knowledge about how people wanted to interact and started to gather more data about what people were interested in, which in turn allowed us to offer up different products and services, primarily to do with parking at the airport, we noticed that what was happening was that we were giving all of the IP to the developers, and we were taking benefit of that, but then they were able to sell all of that IP around the world. And so we decided to go sort of jump in with both feet. We bought our own code about 4 or 5 years ago, and then have started to develop that out. We are now a fully self-sufficient team or business unit within MAG that looks after digital, online marketing, trading, business development, and we serve up our platform for the MAG airports primarily, because that's still where we enjoy the majority of our revenue streams, but we do offer it out and serve people in Australia, across Europe, and across the US.
Yeah, and there must be an incredible amount going on behind the scenes at the moment, given the impact for the airline industry.
Yeah, an incredible amount. It's one of the most bizarre years that I've had in my career. I'm sure everybody can say that, but in the sense of we've worked really hard just to tread water and to stop, try and prevent how far back we're going. So I think people have probably seen in the press, we've had some really supportive shareholders. They've had to put some additional cash into the business. We've sold down a large section of our property book. So from a financial and a liquidity perspective, MAG absolutely fine on a go-forward basis, but we've lost 95% of all of our passengers compared to pre-COVID, and in turn lost similar amounts of revenue as well. So that's triggered us from a tech perspective to think about, right, how do we build back better, which is a bit of a cliche at the moment, but what does that mean in terms of not just the products and services that we're offering out to the market, but what things are going on behind the scenes that allow us to understand people's sort of wants and needs better from a quantitative perspective as well as that qualitative perspective.
Yeah, and has tech been important in being able to do that and understand what the picture's like?
Yeah, hugely. So if you give you one step, when we saw a glimmer of trading back in August, September 2020, when we had that little window between lockdowns, we were noticing that there was a big shift in consumer behaviour. I think 75% of our bookings were coming within 5 or 6 days of departure. Pre-COVID, that was completely unheard of. That might have been 20% at most. And so it was little things we were trying to offer out, a maximum cancellation policy. So it'd be as flexible as we possibly could, so people could book with confidence. If they went onto a red list or an airline stopped flying, then if they'd booked directly with us, we were able to refund them up to like an hour before departure and that type of thing. On a go forward basis, a lot of our systems, like a lot of revenue management systems, are built upon what happened prior year. And it's probably not going to be until summer 22 that we're expecting to get closer back to pre-COVID volumes. So from a revenue management perspective, we're seeing that actually our prior year, our most relevant prior year, is potentially going to be 3 or 4 years out of date. So behind the scenes, we're working on the platform to look at what other data sets can we bring that are going to allow the commercial and the marketing team to actually react in real time, as opposed to solely relying upon that prior year booking curve, which is going to be minimum 4 years old.
Yeah, big piece of work keeping up with what's going on. Michelle, you work with airports as part of your portfolio of clients and properties that you manage around the world through Morecom, or that clients manage using your tech solutions. What are some of the things that real estate players, that landlords are looking to get out of their tech stack at the moment, and are you seeing a greater investment in tech in the last year?
Tech is becoming really important, but it's, as important to have the human at the other end of that tech. We see our products as enablers in order to deliver what is required in retail places. So for us, our platform and others are looking to gather as much data as possible and be that data on what's happening within the property, but also what's happening outside of the property in terms of the consumer and the consumer visiting. So for us, it's enabling that whole pathway and that whole relationship. How can the landlord and property manager deliver a better service to the tenant, who now is their customer, in order for that customer to deliver better to the end customer? And what data can we gather and share in terms of making that whole experience frictionless and better for everyone involved? So that's really where we sort of are coming from. It's that digital collision between how a mall is a place where people want to spend time, and how to get that full integration of all the data that flows around that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you seeing greater investment, or is there still a lot of property companies with their head in the sand at not doing their digital transformation still?
A bit of both, to be honest, Paul. I think, there's so much talk about it that people are slowly lifting their head out of the sand and saying, yeah, we need to do something. But I think there's a lot of technical debt sitting around in the market, and people are very scared, if that's a word, to make a change and go to something new which they might not understand. And also they view technology implementation as something that may take 5 years, especially from a retail perspective, when they put in ERP systems that's taken 10 years and they still don't work. Where obviously the marketplace now is much more agile. You put something in, within 2 or 3 weeks it's up and running and you're getting the results from it. So it's understanding that difference between the long-term value, but also looking at what's going to deliver now. So it's really changing the mindset from a cost to an investment, and that is happening. That definitely is starting to happen now.
Yeah. And when you say technical debt, what do you mean by that?
Well, that's basically the old legacy systems that have been hanging around for years, where instead of looking at something modern and new, or to digitalize and modernly digitalize a process, they're hanging around looking at the old tech and saying, well, it's worked for all these years, so let's just carry on. And a lot of that tech was not bespoke way. So it wasn't there to be adaptable. And what we're looking at is all the tech we're implementing now, and others should be implementing, should be future adaptable and future usable in different ways, and not just created for, retailers go out and they have an ERP system created just for them. That's not going to be the way of the future. You take something, more or less off the shelf that can be changed and used in different ways going forward.
Yeah, and I guess some of the people that you speak to across the table, that they've maybe tried something 5 years ago and had a bad experience, and then they sort of don't want to touch tech again. Do you get some of that as well?
Oh, totally. You always get that, and I guess that's the cultural and skills gap that exists within real estate, is not understanding that it's good to fail sometimes. That's the whole process of implementing tech and learning about what works for your business. But I think for me, the most important thing is that link between strategy and tech strategy, is that we need to make sure that those two are, and any business needs to make sure that those two are linked completely together. Because the only way that, I think it's something like 89% of executives believe that the only way that they're going to add value to their business going forward is through their technology. So it's something that is a must-have rather than, a nice to have. So education and skills need to be created and developed around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Skills, very important. So, Andrea, how is tech influencing the Bruntwood Works? And you're working with Trafford Council on some interesting joint ventures around town centre regeneration. How is it influencing that work?
So thanks, Paul. As you say, Bruntwood Works and Trafford Council have a JV in which we're repurposing and repositioning Stretford Mall and Stamford Quarter in Aldringham. From a tech perspective, if you take Stretford Mall, it was built in the late 60s when people's shopping habits and tech requirements were completely different. Now people want convenience, they want what they want, when they want it, and they want to dictate how they want to receive it. And no matter if you're a retailer or a property owner or a council, we're all trying to work out how to give the community, the consumer, the customer exactly that. And it was interesting through COVID to see how quickly retailers had to pivot the business to be more tech savvy. And we have a local independent in Stretford called the Food Hall, which is a convenience store with a pop-up food and beverage arm to it. And in response to COVID, they launched a convenience store website, which promised to deliver your groceries to your home within 2 hours of ordering online. So in many respects, it was a lifesaver for the local community. But regarding our current regeneration of Stretford Mall and Stamford Quarter, tech's been absolutely central. The first crucial thing we wanted to understand is who's our community. So we engaged with a research company, CACI, to understand the catchments, the demographics, etc. We then went into public consultation with that knowledge, and actually due to COVID, it ended up being online. We then built a website where people could interact with our ideas and plans. And whilst we missed having the face-to-face interaction that you would normally have, the much bigger investment we made into the web platform actually enabled us to understand the community and more effectively. So when they told us what they wanted, from a better, busier town centre, improved connections around and across the Stretford itself, better pedestrian and cycle routes, and a better quality environment with greenery and open spaces, we listened to the community, and then we're able to look at the human behaviours and put together a town centre experience with community at its heart. And we see tech as an integral part of creating a smart town centre. And for us, that smart bit means that it facilitates what people want and need. And a big part of that is the physical and human experience and interaction. So whilst tech's integral to what we're doing, it's definitely not about sitting at home and shopping online only. So we see a future resilient town centre to be a place where community will, they can live, work, shop, eat, drink, play, relax, whatever that needs to be. So it becomes an ecosystem where everything supports each other. So for example, the community of workers and residents provide the footfall to the shops and the shopkeepers and the hospitality operators, and in turn they provide the amenity for the community to enjoy. And also central to that is wellness. So we have a big focus on public realm. In fact, we've got a park planned for Stretford Town Centre, and we'll look to offer free Wi-Fi. All the lights will be solar powered, etc. We've got footfall monitors to provide real-time data, which we can then share with the retail leisure community. They can understand the trading patterns of their community. And also technology will play a really important role, but ultimately it's about facilitating real life experiences outside the home. And we see tech as something that will connect people and places and even nature. It's something that it's not something that signals the end of the high street, it supports it. You know, bird watchers can get an app to identify what birds they can hear, but it doesn't mean they'll want to sit at home and listen to, you know, bird song online. So fundamentally, you know, we're trying to understand what the desires of the community are, and we feel it all boils down to people want convenience. They want to be able to order online and have items delivered to their door, but, you know, they want to click and collect, but that's not the death of the high street. You know, they also want to get the hair cut, the nails done, go to the gym, eat out, meet the friends. You know, all these things are physical. So future town centre needs to be tech savvy, put my teeth in. It needs to have tech-savvy retail and hospitality operators, but it also needs physical services to be a community hub. So not death of the high street, more of an evolution. You know, people still want to shop for pleasure, they want the day out, but they may want to, you know, order online, pay via the phone, cashless, etc. I guess the bottom line is that tech and physical retail need to complement each other. Yeah, so it's a really interesting space, as you can see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's fascinating seeing these things blend and come together, especially as human behaviour has been forced to change the last year, and now we're, you know, certainly in the UK, sort of easing out of that lockdown, and then what the future holds and which of these things will stick.
Yeah.
Michelle, have you noticed that that there's ways that tech platforms can help with this change in terms of, you know, some of the pressures that retailers and landlords are under? There's a lot of pressure on the balance sheets for them, and a lot around cost saving and being cash strapped at the moment. Is that something that they can employ operationally, and indeed to consumers to attract people in to help with the balance sheets?
Well, for me, I think retail needs to change significantly from what it has been. You know, it needs to become more adaptive. It needs to look at its environment. I mean, with digital omnipresence, you know, we're all talking about digital omnichannel. You know, now we're talking about digital omnipresence. Is people want to purchase no matter where they are. So there's this real blurring between social purchasing, e-commerce, online purchasing in store. You know, people want to be able to be sitting anywhere and shop either through their social media channels, directly on e-commerce, or whatever it is. So retail needs to be adaptive, and that whole process needs to be streamlined, one process. People don't, you know, the customer, you know, I've got a daughter who's 23 and a son who's 19. They don't think about the different channels. They just think about shopping and or purchasing, no matter what channel whether it's Snapchat or LinkedIn, or no, it really doesn't matter to them. And I think that's where retail really needs to move to. It's not a bricks and mortar versus e-commerce. It's the whole. It's the whole platform is what's available to everyone, you know. And WeChat is a brilliant example of that. I mean, I think they generated something like $112 billion. Was it billion or trillion? I mean, $1 billion in 2019 just through WeChat, you know. So people are used to using social channels, and we've got to make sure that our retailers, in the way that they're marketing themselves, are also pushing through that social channel relationship. And yeah, I've got a really small example, but there's a florist in our village, and I don't really know her, but I've been on her Facebook page. I've ordered directly through her using Messenger. I've paid on my banking app, and she delivers it. That's how easy it is. I don't go to a website. I don't pick up my phone. I don't, you know, and yet the service is great. I'm supporting local. All those days of going to Interflora and, you know, and that sort of whole process. This is so much easier. And she lets me know when it's been delivered, and she takes a photograph of it, and, you know, so it's much more personal. And I think that's what retail needs to be. And it's not going to cost a lot. It's just a complete change of mindset in the way that retail thinks bricks and mortar, e-commerce, It needs to be all one platform.
Yeah, and are property companies, when they're looking at tech solutions, are they still seeing it as a cost, or are they seeing it as an investment?
A bit of both, I think. You know, I think they're all very strapped for cash, as we know. You know, as much as the retailers are, so are the landlords, and even more so based on the latest legal cases that have just gone through. So I think the landlords are struggling, but I think in order to move forward and understand how they're going to be more effective and efficient in their properties, yeah, they need to look at tech, because data is what's going to drive them forward and give them the ability to manage more effectively and efficiently. Because, you know, the tenants don't want to pay their service charge, so the costs of that need to be brought down as much as possible, but yet deliver a better experience, which is quite difficult to do. And tech as the enabler, needs to be able to do that.
Yeah, sure. And Brad, you Mago works with third-party organisations as well, does it? Not just Manchester Airports Group. So tell us a bit about who you're working with and how the products and services that you've come up with and you've developed have been received out in the market.
Yeah, sure thing. Primarily with other airports, we are increasingly seeing that there's certain parts of our tech stack that are relevant to or are agnostic of industry. But primarily, we're using our track record to demonstrate to other airports that we can unlock additional or incremental revenue that we believe they're leaving on the table because of, you know, both the trading aspects of what we do, the digital marketing expertise that we've got in house, and then all of that is supported by the technology. So it's really just demonstrating to them what we've been doing at our 3 airports, so they get a sense of actually these people can be trusted because they're doing it with their own assets. And then we just take them through the journey of how we've increased our yield primarily, which is all about increasing ATV, so average transaction values, and making sure that we're increasing our conversion rates. So people that are coming to the website, they're not just coming purely for information. We make sure we serve that up in the speediest way that we possibly can, and hopefully it's easy to consume. But as they then come onto the site, we're trying to understand their motivation for coming onto the site in the first place, whether it's they're looking at, you know, what time their flight is leaving or departing, or they might be picking someone up or dropping somebody off. They want to understand the layout of the airport, and we're constantly trying to think of ways when people are on the website, if we can satisfy their need for information, how else can we then put products and services in front of them? Maybe not to purchase right there and then, but we are second guessing that they are going to be a consumer at some point into the future. So it's how do we bring people back to us so they buy directly from us as opposed to a third party or a competitor. And
when people are in the physical airport, in the terminals, obviously they've been pretty quiet, unfortunately, the last year or so, but how will you be using tech to improve the experience and also to drive revenue in stores and restaurants, etc., within terminals?
Yeah, if I can answer that in 2 ways. The actual operation, the physical operation, Mag IT looks after that aspect. So all of the running of the FID screens, so the flight information display screens that you see when you go to the airport, all of the security equipment, the check-in desk, that type of hard asset technology, that's looked after by my colleagues that work in Mag IT, as we term it. Where Mago gets involved is actually working with our concessionaires, so our retailers. So a little bit to what Michelle was saying, how do we link that physical and that digital experience so it feels seamless for the consumer? In particular, well, duty free, so our duty free provider, they're getting bigger and bigger in this space and becoming more interested in the conversations that we've been having in terms of if we could offer a really compelling online offer that is then consumed once you're in store, because there are some legal aspects and tax aspects that we have to adhere to, which means that we have to really see it as a joined up journey, i.e. digitally first and then consumed within the terminal. We've actually demonstrated to them that if you do a compelling offer, actually your ATV goes up when people have pre-booked or pre-purchased online, as opposed to just walking through the store and just being there in the terminal. But if you don't mind, as listening to Michelle speak there, I don't know if anybody read Oliver Dowden's piece in the Telegraph yesterday. He was talking about bringing in laws for social media companies. That wasn't going to be my point, but there was a sentence in there when he was talking about the virtual world and then the real world, and it really struck me that actually we need to break down this barrier between digital, virtual, and the real world. The real world is, to Michelle's point, this is how people are consuming now. It's all those barriers have completely been blurred in my mind, and I think organisations need to stop thinking about it in terms of those two different worlds. It's just one, and it's how people are interacting.
Thank you. And Andrea, I mean, department stores is a major sort of subplot to the whole, upheaval of we're seeing in retail at the moment. You've got some town centres there with department stores in as well, and as a developer and landlord looking at those sort of chunky assets, what do you see as the future for those?
Yeah, it's interesting space, isn't it? Because independent retailers are the key, aren't they, to building a unique town centre. We've been talking about that for a while now. We no longer want the cloned high streets, and as you say, we're seeing many department stores closing, leaving a wealth of space that requires the innovation to repurpose. But we don't have to think of like new trends as totally new concepts. It's ultimately about convenience that we talked about before. Linking to the idea of a 10, a 15, or a 20-minute neighbourhood, and the revival of civic uses for the high streets, education, healthcare, as well as putting the community themselves, into these larger spaces. So whilst it might seem bleak for department stores, what we're seeing at the moment is a reincarnation of them, not an end to them. So we've got some large anchor stores that are choosing to collaborate and using tech to do that. So, for example, Next have led the way in this area for some time with in-store concessions, being with retailers such as Reese Clothing, Waterstones, recently Mamas and Papas, and Homebase. And this feels like a dawning of the mini department store with an implied element of a carefully curated space rather than just the need to fill square footage. So tech to retailers, online and physical retailers such as Next, and their concessions is fundamental, I guess, to as the online data can be used to identify hotspot locations, and pinpoint their most profitable postcodes. Marks and Spencer's is following suit. They've introduced carefully selected range of brands. So in store and online, you now have Joules and Sea Salts, plus a few others. And these brands not only overlap with M&S customer base, the brands also help to drive shoppers to the shop and to M&S both physically and online. So Altrincham, we've not only got one, but two ex-department stores. So we've been considering all the possible avenues to maximise the future success of that space and for it to be additive to the town centre. So our department stores, which were a Debenhams in the House of Fraser, we're looking at the integration of hospitality, retail and workspace, a blending of all of those. The idea of a lifestyle store where you can access everything you need to work, play, and possibly even live. Introducing residential to into a place will bring people to the heart of everything. And these larger spaces will leave, plenty of scope to bring housing into the offer, but also there's further opportunities to add other uses such as last mile deliveries, dark kitchens, now dark stores, and click and collect. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to a lot of those. There's some applications starting to come in for the ex Debenhams and House of Frasers around the country. We've got a question in from Danny Crump at Broadway Mallion in the audience. Michelle, if I could come to you with Danny's question following the
conversation about linking the physical and the digital worlds. He's interested to hear from the panel on how tech is being used to support the curation and stewardship of places around things like journey, arrival, events, management, etc. So you talk to us a bit about that.
Well, I think it's all down to what data you can gather and how personal that information can be. You know, I mean, everyone wants to. Let me think back on that a bit. So when you go shopping, you tend to go the same route every single time you go into a shopping centre. You park in the same place and you take your same route through the centre. So often you don't actually get to see what's available. So I think, you know, it's all about understanding that customer journey and understanding that new customer journey from a physical point of view, understanding that same customer journey that you would take if you were online. So Andrew was talking about Next, which I think is always a brilliant example, because I think their direct mail and their brochure, I just can't think of the name of it, you know, that has been fundamental to the way that they have run their business for many, many years. So now they know exactly what me as a customer are doing when I go online and what I'm looking at. And then when I go to my local Next, that's not transferred into my their knowledge of me when I walk through the door. And, you know, they don't come to me and say, oh, I see that you bought this online, and, you know, this is what we've got in the store that you like. So it really is merging all of that data and understanding how that data is going to deliver a better experience. And, you know, and I mean, we've talked about data for years and years, haven't we? And, you know, you can take the Nectar card, you can take the Boots card, you can take all of that data gathered for years, but how much are they actually using that data to generate that personal experience? And it comes down to, do we have the right people and do we have the right analysts to deliver the value that comes out of that data? You know, I mean, I've been in a Boots, you know, card holder for years, right from having babies all the way through to where I am now in my life. But actually, Boots hasn't gone through that life cycle with me. And they're still not going through that life cycle with me. Yet they have all the data about me. So it's really, you know, interesting. Data, collection of data is really important, but it's how that data is used in order to enhance the experience. And you know, I hope I'm answering the question, be that experience from the time you get in your car to the time you go into a store, and the experience that you want in store to the time you leave, and whether you ultimately make that purchase online and not in store. What is that data? What is that story? And what is that customer journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrea, this is probably an example from your work at Hatch, is there, on the sort of food and beverage side, that very cool sort of shipping container little yard that you've got there under the flyover. Yeah.
I mean, physical experiences that humans instinctively want to experience, that shared experience, the fireside moment, if you like, are more alive than ever, particularly after COVID. You know, after the lockdown, we saw our high streets bounce back, and our destinations like Hatch and Afflex are booming with trade as people, you know, want that physical experience again. What we've done at Hatch, we've integrated tech to create a safe and COVID-safe environment. So, for example, we've introduced a booking system, which is Res Diary, so that we can obviously people can book tables, so so they know that they're going to go at that particular time that they want to pick. They've got 2 hours. They can go with the friends. They know they're going to be in a safe environment, COVID-safe environment. And obviously we know who's going to come through the door, etc. So it just makes it quite seamless. And we also have a system called Good Till, where you can order from your table. And interestingly, what we found from that is that we saw revenues increase for our traders, because of course, you know, as you're finishing your drink or as you're having something to eat, then you're able to not having to queue. You know, people can keep enjoying themselves at the table. And therefore, essentially, spend per head went up. So that was a positive thing that we saw out of COVID. And we're also seeing a lot of success from independent retailers having launched online, but wanting to create a physical brand experience to blend with their online presence. So take, for example, Nordic Muse. So they started online, Then they grew with us at Hatch, and now she's got bricks and mortar in the northern quarter, and they very much blended growing online sales with the physical brand presence. And also in Stamford Quarter, we've launched a pop-up shop to keep that evolving experience alive, if you like, you know, to support footfall and also to support independent retail. Interesting on that, our first customer, Loose Surface Patterns, had already established a strong online following. I think she had about 9,000 followers, but she wanted, you know, a 10-day stint in Altrincham on the high street to connect with a new audience, you know, physically, to increase a brand awareness and presence to ultimately produce more sales. And, you know, we believe we'll just see more of this and it will become the norm.
Yeah, it's interesting as people have emerged from the home and from lockdown. It's you know, just a basic thing that we take for granted nowadays, but social media is very important for just showing images of where is open and where's got good outdoor seating, or you know, just reminding people you can come to this site, or venues that have maybe appeared, meanwhile spaces, or you know, new park areas, things like that. So that's all curating the space, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm still getting used to having emails the morning after you've been out, because you've got to register for all these apps now, sending you receipts and showing you as you're starting your working day what you had to drink the night before. Not the nicest, but
No.
and Brad, anything to add on that from a sort of management of the spaces within the airports and curating that experience for visitors, for passengers as they come through, using tech to blend that physical and digital experience?
Yeah, some of the things, we're probably not as far ahead in this space as a group as we'd like to be, but some of the things that are going to be happening with the new Terminal 2 that's opening at Manchester. I think we've got the biggest digital wall, certainly in the UK, if not Europe, in an airport. It allows interactive content, as do all of our flight information display screens. So the marketing team are working with our commercial teams who look after all of our retailers, our concessionaires, and our operational teams to really understand how do we join up that journey from, you might have booked something online with us, you've then arrived curbside at the airport, at the terminal, say, and then how do we interact with you all the way through to your gate. And as soon as the terminal opens, we will have, you know, the start of our ability to do that.
Yeah, that's look forward to seeing that. And Michelle, any advice, just going for Tom Hackett at Purple? There's a question at the top about advice for where should businesses begin if they're looking to begin this journey of merging the physical and digital store experience.
I think that they should look at their social media. I think they've got to look at their brand content, their user-generated content, and their e-commerce, and they've got to look at bringing that all together. You know, they've got to look at every single aspect of their business and make sure that it's, you know, as I said earlier, that it's one business and it's not seen as a whole lot of different individual platforms that they communicate on or deal with. It's all one platform, and it's seen as one platform. So make sure that you can, if you're a retailer, you can sell online through social media as well as you can sell in store, as well as you can sell through e-commerce. That would be my, you know, my suggestion. In terms of tech, I mean, I think it's a case of what is your business strategy and how does that blend with your tech strategy? What are the two together? What are your business? You know, do you need more analysts? Do you need more tech people? And I think also there's, you know, I'm bringing out lots of sayings today, but there's also the democratization of tech. And, you know, putting tech in the hands of everybody. You know, gone are the days where you had to, you know, be trained for hours and days and to learn tech. Now it's a case of tech needs to be simple enough that the whole organization can use it and deliver their own personal experience through tech. So look at your tech stack, understand where you are and what it is you want to achieve, and know that it should be simplistic enough to actually generate what you want and deliver those returns to your business immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you. And there's another question there. If I stay with you for a minute, Michelle, is it concerns about privacy and data, which always comes up. Is that something that clients ask across the table when they're signing up for the comms and engagement apps that you provide?
Well, we have a standard. I mean, we adhere to all GDPR requirements, obviously, and we have privacy policies, and we work really closely as data processors or data owners with our clients to deliver that. But it's not a bigger challenge as maybe everyone thought it was a couple of years ago when GDPR came into play. It's looking and managing those databases effectively and efficiently, and making sure that they are safe and they're not available to everybody, and making sure that people sign up to them. Your privacy policy is really important, and before you log on to any of our applications, you have to sign up to that privacy policy immediately. So it's much easier than people think it is. And if you have any issues, there's plenty of information around, and most organizations now have a data processing officer who works with them to ensure that their systems and procedures are lawful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brad, is there, it's quite a hard-hitting question here, is that when does personalization of customer experience become intrusion of privacy? Is there a danger of that in your view, Brad?
I think up until a few years ago, potentially, but I think certainly people within the UK, they are very well protected by the law now. And when you go onto a website and you see the request to allow cookies, etc., I think, but to Michelle's point, it's now become the consumer's choice. I think it's always a person's choice. This is how I think about it. If I'm being asked not just to accept cookies, but to offer up my personal details, whether it be email, do I want to store my card payments on the website, which makes it easier next time you want to make a purchase, and the organisations know that, then actually what am I getting in return? So what value exchange is there? And I suppose the little window into the tech world that I've had over the last 9-10 months, it allows me to see how powerful that data can be when you're serving up products and services to be consumed. It's that convenience that means that invariably the average transaction value goes up, the conversion rate is higher. So as a consumer now, I want to know what I'm getting in return to make it easier to have products sold to me. So again, I think it's a personal choice. As long as you're dealing with credible organisations that have got all of their PCI compliance in place, they are adhering to GDPR, and their systems are safe and secure, then I think you're absolutely fine.
Yeah. And Andrea, as well as data privacy and our personal privacy, which is one of the main subjects that comes up, there's also sustainability and ESG. Is that something that is important to you and your work at Bruntwood Works?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it runs through the veins of everything that we do. Everything from repurposing buildings through to the retailers that are coming through, setting standards in terms of food, standards being red tractor, aspirational standards which might adhere to straw-fed hand-reared cattle. We've got a green pledge at Hatch about recycling, but it's such a big sphere. And I think just going forward, climate change goes across everything, and retailers are responding to that now and making ethical choices, and that even goes through to delivery as well as manufacturing. And so we are very aware of that, and we also have credentials that we will stand by. Everything that we talked about before in terms of solar panel lighting, maybe it's district heating systems. It goes from the very fibre of a development to property all the way through to our community and every interaction that they have with us. So yeah, it's fundamental, and I think that by doing that as well, not only doing the right thing, I also think we should be able to then also attract retailers. People have been really savvy about where they're spending the money and they're more conscious than ever, which has been great because it has put pressure on retailers to perform. We're putting our own pressures on ourselves. And so basically, you know, if everyone's doing the same thing, going in the right direction. And another thing that we're really keen on is opening up pedestrian routes and also cycle routes to promote, you know, that 10, 15, 20-minute neighbourhood town. So you can access your town centre very easily. And then when you get there, that every interaction that you might not even know has sustainable credentials behind it.
Yeah, sure. And Michelle, are you seeing a greater focus on energy performance within the centres where you work?
Definitely. I mean, there's a huge ESG focus. You know, there always was a focus on energy in terms of ensuring that they were sustainable as possible. But generally, you know, it's certainly enhanced. Maybe got lost a little bit of the way during COVID, but has come back really strongly now. And, you know, our product also enables the data collection sort of information, which is then shared. You know, retailers are very aware of their stance as well with their millennial customers, because, you know, those customers want more than just the product and service that they're buying. They want to know that there's depth to that brand, and that brand is socially responsible in every possible way. And that's going towards the landlords as well, you know, and they all have ESG strategies which are now being pushed through into their properties more strongly than before.
Yeah. Well, it's only going to grow, isn't it? And interesting to see what happens later this year with COP26 taking place in Glasgow in November. UK presidency of that with the UN. That's brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Covered a lot of good ground this morning and got us off to a great start. Please do hang around for the second half, where we'll be hearing from some more techies and architects talking about some of the solutions that are coming in and redesigning the high street and centres. And we'll take a 10-minute break now. We'll go through to the networking room, and we'll see you back here at 10:35. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We've got some of our second panelists coming on there. Here we go. I'll just start with a quick once round. If you just say who you are, where you're from, what you do. Karen, I'll start with you.
Hi, so my name is Karen Burns. I am from Estonia. We have a company called Faima, based out of the UK and here in Tallinn. And what we do, we built an AI engine that's able to understand anything happening in a real-time video feed. So we work with retailers, mixed-use business parks, and urban centers to help them understand what's actually happening in their physical space. And the setup is completely self-serve. So you don't need an AI team, a tech team, none of that stuff. All you need is a camera URL, and you're up and running.
Brilliant, thank you. And Ben?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Chief Operating Officer at a company called Dent Reality. We're a London-based augmented reality navigation company. We primarily work with retail stores at the moment. So that means, you know, we can provide turn-by-turn directions to shoppers to basically help them find everything they're looking for in a retail store. And then on top of that, because we know exactly where they are in a store at all times, we can personalize their journey with, you know, recommendations, promotions, and display kind of relevant product information and things like that. So we're primarily working with grocery stores, but we hear from all sorts of retailers, and also all types of physical spaces. So I guess shopping centers as well in a retail context, but airports, train stations, hotels, offices, hospitals, etc., all want to use augmented reality to add value to their guests or visitors or shoppers. So that's primarily what I'll be talking about today.
Yeah, that's great. And as augmented reality, is that done through your phone?
Exactly, yeah. So currently almost every smartphone is capable of augmented reality. For those who it might be an unfamiliar term, it's where a digital image can get overlaid onto the real world via your phone, which relates to the real world. So for example, you know, arrows that take you a certain direction.
Yeah, superb. And Natalia?
Good morning, everyone. I'm from Shabby Robson, associate partner at Architectural Practice. We've got offices in London, Manchester, and Glasgow, and we're involved in all sorts of projects, different sectors, but including retail and repurposing of retail and regenerating city centres and environment of our high streets. And there's lots of interesting projects on the go right now, one on site, another one in pipeline for planning, another one got planning through this year. So we're quite busy, and quite a big part of our projects are retail and looking at it, how it could be used in the future and what is the future of the physical retail space. And I will be very happy to share my thoughts on that today.
Thank you very much. And Dan?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Apologies for my voice. I lost it somewhere, but I'll do my best here. So I'm Dan Gildoni, and I'm co-founder and CEO of PlaceTech, calling in from sunny Tel Aviv. KPMG refer to us as the Google Analytics for the physical world. And the reason for that is because we actually found a way to collect data from smartphones and to allow you to look at any location out there, any physical location, any address, whether if it's owned by you or not, and get information that up to now is available only in the online world. How many people, where do they come from, who they are, social demographics, and many additional pieces of information that are very important for decision making when speaking about the physical world.
Yeah, that's superb. And to kick us off, Karen, tell me a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing that are shaping retail into the future.
So the companies we work with want to understand what is happening with the customer within their physical space, and they're reluctant to spend a lot of money on various sensors. So currently they only really aggregate footfall. They're expensive, and to get real data out of it, you still have to get it to a data analytics team to actually understand what's happening in the space, or you have to install 3D or expensive AI cameras. So that's kind of where we have stepped in. We also see two types of retailers. So those who are very keen to get digital, get online, get it all kind of, understand what an individual customer needs, how to tailor their offering better. And then there are more kind of old school ones who still have to go through a massive digitalization journey and mindset shift to even be able to start adopting AI. So it's an interesting kind of trend that we've seen with retailers.
Yeah, and how easy is it to switch on the tech that you deploy?
So for us, it's extremely easy for one camera to be turned on the platform by anybody with a camera URL stream. Takes less than 20 seconds.
Okay, and how are the results being put into practice? What's the impact of the data that people learn?
Mm-hmm. So there's various kind of use cases. We work with computer vision. So you can essentially draw virtual sensors anywhere in a camera field of view. So if you wanted to understand how many people stand in front of a marketing billboard or an ad, or even a mannequin in a shop, you would just draw a circle around it. And FIMA would tell you how many people from which gender looked at it and for how long. One of the customers we work with wanted to understand when people enter, where do they go? So once they had counted the specific numbers of people turning into a food court, they were then able to send in a cleaning team rather than having to do spot checks on a regular basis. So some of this feeds into kind of making the mall or the shop actually run more smoothly and provide a better customer experience. We saw a really interesting trend here in Tallinn where right after the shops opened again after COVID, the spike in female visitors was massive. So we're assuming that they went in to buy the kind of things that you can't just buy online, like creams and things that you have to try on. And then it kind of gradually dropped off during the week. But if we'd known that beforehand, now we can learn. And that's something that could be utilized really well for a marketing campaign.
Yeah. And Dan, tell us some of the trends that you're seeing with the people you work with.
So I guess the main trend is still has a lot to do with COVID. The entire space of retail People is something that up to a year ago was obvious. People would just come in, would just walk around. And what happened with COVID is that people became something which is not obvious, and data became a necessity. And now we see a growing demand from our customers needing to get a better ability to evaluate their traffic, to evaluate their competitors, to make a better understanding of where they stand against their competitors, to make indexes, to be able to see how did some kind of regulation affect footfall, how did they affect catchment, and how do we base ourselves compared to our competitors. So I guess one of the intriguing things is that we see now more people making much more effort in understanding these patterns, spending more money and bringing in more talented people or people with the relevant skills to be able to actually analyze type of footfall data. Overall, the goal is one. The goal is to bring back traffic. The goal is to win traffic when compared to the competition. And the goal is to make sure that the proposition is the relevant one. That's on the retail side. And on the asset side, looking at as an asset manager in a way, needing to make sure that leases are optimal, is making sure that they can prove a point to the tenant that the traffic coming in is and that it's good enough to maintain lease levels, if not even increase them.
Yeah, yeah. And is this something that is being used to redesign and redevelop centers? Is that something that property companies can take that data?
So the world of repurposing is nothing new, and it's just evolving and accelerating more and more because of COVID and the need to make a stronger effort into making an establishment or retail establishment more relevant for the population. And of course, a part of what we see is that in order to make the right place, the most important thing is understanding who is actually coming there, what are their needs, and that's part of the data that we provide our customers.
Yeah, and you talked about skills. What are some of the skills that property companies need to bring in to make the most out of these sorts of tools?
So analyze data and the ability to actually use the insights that we're able to provide. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. I remember going to Expo Real, one of the largest real estate conferences just 2 years ago, and speaking with the expansion managers of one of the leading supermarket chains in Europe. And I asked him, tell me, how do you know where to expand to? How do you know what to do? He looked at me and laughed and said, what do you mean? I've been doing it for the past 40 years. I just know. And I mean, it's very important to know and very important to understand. But now it's also very important bringing in the relevant people that can add on to this gentleman's decisions, also the data that would be relevant to making the right decision. And is part of the skill, part of business intelligence and data analyses. And we see more and more professionals, data professionals, actually joining these companies that up to now just didn't have this type of skill set.
Yeah, yeah. And what would be your advice to property companies when how do they go and find the right people and hire or commission the right skills?
So I can share what we do to try and do it. We stay very close to the universities and to the academia. At a very, very early stage, we bring interns at an early stage. We allow a variety of AI faculties to use our data for training. And we start involving the young generation with these type of place topics, data related to place topics, from the first days of when they get exposed to this type of data. So that's the main thing is actually grow a generation of data experts that could help go into the next step and adding innovation and data into decision making.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's such a huge thing to sort of reskilling and the diversity of backgrounds and sort of education and people coming into real estate at the moment. And Ben, tell us a little bit about some of the companies that you work with that are using your augmented reality.
Yeah, so one example at the moment is Marks and Spencer's, where we're working with them to bring our solution to their shoppers. And I think it's kind of linked to what Karen and Dan have been saying. We've seen similar macro trends in general from the retailers we work with, that data is a kind of critical enabler of customer experience. You need to understand, who is in your store, why, what do they want, what are their objectives. And we're hearing time and time again, especially since the pandemic, that investing in that in-store customer experience is not just an increased focus, but starting to really become a strategic differentiator for a lot of retailers. I think it's not news that shoppers have been using the internet for quite a while, and their expectations have changed in terms of having a personalized, convenient, easy experience, and retail, or kind of in-store retail, hasn't changed that much in quite a long time. So retailers are now aware that the technology is there, and they can start to really provide a lot of those things in store as well.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, what does it look like, and how do you get people to use it? If I go into M&S, how do I get pushed onto that platform?
So with M&S, it's not at every store at the moment. It's just some in London. But you basically will use the M&S app or a retailer's app. You will open that on your phone. It will kick you into in-store mode. You'll be able to, on your phone, add whatever item you want in that store. It will add as many as you want to your list. In a grocery context, you might be adding 20, 30, 40 items. Our technology will quickly reorder all of those to get you the most efficient route. You will then be able to, if you hold your phone up, it will take you into augmented reality mode, or camera mode as we call it, where you will see through your phone's camera an image of the store, and it will overlay digital images to basically guide you, arrows to guide you around the store. So that's the core of the experience, essentially.
And what's the take-up been like in those stores?
Yeah, really good. And it's interesting. I think one of the things that we found, augmented reality is a really exciting visual core part of the experience. And I think augmented reality has often been quite gimmicky in the past. People use it for things like marketing, whereas our approach was very much, this has to solve a specific problem for people. This has to be easier than the previous way of finding yourself around. But we know it's not for everyone. So we also have a bird's eye map view on the screen, as well as the augmented reality view. And actually, one really fascinating thing about take-up has been that I didn't predict, was that slightly older shoppers really hooked on to the augmented reality and found it very easy to use. They kind of get straight into it and love it, whereas broadly younger users feel more comfortable with essentially the indoor map view, which is interesting. It kind of takes the thought out of it. The AR view, you just go, and it's been fascinating to watch people fall in love with that.
Yeah, I guess it's not as much of a problem for the young people with their young legs to run around the store and find what they want.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, and Natalia, tell us how important data is to you today as an architect working in retail.
Well, it's crucial. It really is. I think all the clients should put data as a part of stage zero briefing, stage zero brief forming element. Sometimes the store itself, or the smaller unit that we are looking at rebuilding or remodeling, gives us enough clues. But if the scale of the development is larger, and you need to understand where the retail unit sort of sits within a bigger picture, that's where data is absolutely paramount. It really tells you what the opportunities or options are. The tendency is to probably reduce the amount of retail space wherever you look at, whatever scale you look at. But it's just it's fine-tuning how much you should release to other users or introduce other functions within the development, and how much retail would still retain strong performance. That's where data would be really, really important. So stage 0, we're not talking like, let's look at it once we're already drawing plans. I think before we even start sort of doing sketches, the data should be used. But throughout the process, it's really important. We work with data all the time. We create 3D models of the environment. We use BIM, Revit, and we put data into the models. And once the project is completed, you've got a 3D model with all sorts of data in it. And the more data you use and the more creatively you use that data, the more useful that tool could become. And that's, again, not just good to monitor before you do any interactions, any projects, but it's afterwards, the performance, to test whether everything is fine or further room for improvement, or you just it becomes more intuitive, the whole process, or informed as well. There is another aspect of data that is very important for construction industry overall, the country. The first panel did mention sustainability, but all operators and all landlords will require to reduce the carbon footprint and operational footprint. As a design teams, we help our clients to reduce embodied carbon, but it's operational carbon that's also really quite important. And having data within the model that monitors the outgoings, energy consumption is also part of it. It really would help. So it's data from footfall to energy to behavioral patterns. It's all will become one. And I think coming from sort of physical side of spaces to sort of very digital, I think bringing it together, that's definitely a way forward. And it's really interesting times for us. As I said before, when we were talking in the green room, it would be great to see all 3 of you guys as a part of design team for us, sort of bringing new things, new thinking into the process.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you heard it here. They've just officially been commissioned by Shepherd Robson, so good to see some business done.
I don't think we commission. It should be the client that commissioning things. I know we will be sort of consultants sitting around the same virtual table or physical table, depends. There's lots of exchanges in ownership of retail spaces. I think pre-COVID, it was local authorities bought about up to 1 billion worth of shopping centers in sort of smaller towns or medium-sized towns. And I think it would take some good data to inform them how to take it forward and what to do with it. Again, sort of the early feasibilities should be data-based, but also I think for us, it's not all doom and gloom. It's a great opportunity to create new community-focused developments. And as I said, sometimes buildings and cities, towns, they tell you what's the unique point, selling point about them. So there are some listed buildings, there are some unique focal points like riverbanks, and capitalizing on those physical assets as well as digital, I think is really important, because people are attracted to settings, to beautiful environment. The Instagrammable sort of wall installation is just as attractive as the goods on shelves, or so it's something that it's creating a complex approach to the whole thing is really important.
Yeah.
I think especially with new developments, if the owners, the new owners or the current owners have to be bolder. Really, is you have to. The COVID, with all its tragedy and problems, it's actually accelerated 10 trends that were there before. So less retail, but better performing retail, more community use, and the retail spaces allow you to do that. You shouldn't be scared of empty space, as long as it doesn't act as empty spaces, as long as it's curated and there are lots of events happening there, be it like art installation or some community library exchange, or sort of pop-ups, as well as sort of rooted brands. So it's actually very interesting times, but this picking up intelligence, which is already there, and pulling it together, that would be definitely, those who will do that would be an advantage to those who don't, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And Karen, have you seen tech used in an interesting way in that sort of early stage design of coming in right at the start of a brief or master planning an area?
So not in our case, but we are actually engaged in a couple of projects which want to rebuild. So one of the bigger centers that we're working with, they want to rebuild a section of their mall. So right now there's a quite a large data gathering project ongoing to understand how people are currently using that particular part of the shop. Are there any bottlenecks? Can they get onto the escalator okay? We saw with COVID that people started taking the stairs a lot more. So can they be in a more accessible space, wider? All that kind of data is basically being fed into, like you say, Natalia, the next plans, and the architects are looking at, okay, have our assumptions now actually been made in the correct way? And does the data back that up? Because with the FIMA, we don't just look at footfall, we look at direction of travel and trajectory. So how people move in a space, what kind of like a movement pattern there is, as well as gender and so forth. So that's really valuable data for that kind of stuff. We're also starting a really big pilot project with a 2.2 square kilometer site in central London, which will be public in about a week or two. So again, what they want to understand is how can they make that space safer? Because in urban spaces, the micromobility means that pedestrians have all these buzzing e-scooters and all sorts of weird and wonderful kind of vehicles going past them. Is it safe? Can they be sectioned off in specific ways? So that's something that we're helping basically to understand before they actually do any sort of physical developments. And some of the urban projects we're involved in are related to how public and private space can come together. And that's really driven by post-COVID kind of world, the 15-minute city. Some malls are seeing that their tenants are moving into city centers because there's more people there. People just want to now get out again. So, no shop or no city exists on a planet of its own. It's all an interactive space. So understanding how people actually use that space and how to make it safer, better, perhaps more adaptive even. So that's something that we're helping both urban planners and shopping centers to do.
Yeah, and Dan, is PlaceSense being used to help redesign spaces and assets for your clients?
So we actually see, one of the biggest advantages of using our data is that, we're everywhere. So we can just look at the entire region. And in many cases, to make a decision, and even when coming to master planning, it's about, I'll use the word copycatting. Maybe in the online world, it's using lookalikes, but it's having the ability to look at something that already works, to understand how that works and why that works and what's created that specific establishment to perform well, who is coming there, etc. And we do see a lot of our customers, and it's interesting, by the way, it could be either a architect or a master planner, but even municipalities that are looking at other municipalities to understand where they're driving traffic from, what is their catchment area, and what is actually building the people coming there to shop and to the retail areas, which is something that we commonly do. So it's the ability to look at something which is not owned by me to drive stronger and smarter decisions and to try in a way to copycat something that has already been proven to be good and successful.
Yeah. And Ben, we've heard a lot about new forms of payment coming in. We're moving into sort of cashless society. There's a big debate now about gov coins coming through, central banks having their own digital money and things like that. As augmented reality, as we've come out of the pandemic, has that got a role to play in the way that people shop and purchase?
I think 100%. I think that's really the other side of the coin. I think so far we've mostly spoken about how retailers have adapted and kind of invested in technology, but I think we've seen over the past few months, past year, a really sharp increase in shoppers being very comfortable in using technology in a retail context. I think the example you mentioned there of of in-store payment is probably where there's been the most innovation, and where was probably the best example of really clear shopper comfort. I think if you look at some of the big UK supermarkets, some of the public data on that is really striking about how frequently people go in now and independently check out. So they have a completely contact-free journey, essentially, not necessarily interacting with any staff, and are fully capable of checking out on their phone, depending on which supermarket you're talking about. So this is a kind of groundbreaking, this isn't something that Dent Reality work on, to be clear, but this is a kind of groundbreaking sign for, I think, how shoppers are going to engage with technology in stores, and obviously has big impacts on how retailers lay out their stores and how they generally set up their operations.
Yeah. And what are some of the other things that the likes of Marks and Spencer and your clients are working on that we might see come through in the next couple of years?
The biggest thing that retailers talk about, I think, augmented reality probably sounds. Again, some people are very familiar with it. Some people are, it might be a totally new concept today, but it's at the core of blending the physical and the digital world. I don't know how many of you caught the the first panel, but it came up as a theme a lot in that is very much where the world is going. The physical world and the digital world are kind of increasingly blending, and augmented reality is a quite unique technology in that historically the physical world, retailers and physical spaces have been completely constrained, because if they want to put up something for people to see, it has to have been seen by everyone. If you put up physical signage, it's seen by everyone, so it's very hard to personalize and tailor. But augmented reality is unique in that mobile phones allow a retailer or a physical space to project information just to that individual. So I think what retailers are incredibly excited about, there was a North American CEO that called this the Holy Grail the other day, is that really powerful opportunity to engage with their shoppers one-on-one. So our technology allows them to know exactly where they are in store, to know what they want to buy in the moment because they've entered it on their list, to know where everything else is in store, which of those products are on deal, what you bought last week, and the ability to surface that information in a way that is engaging to the shopper to essentially give them a much more relevant and tailored experience is really what big picture retailers are excited about.
Yeah, and having some sort of hologram appear on your phone and show you around a store is a very novel concept for a lot of people. I would find that potentially quite strange. Have there been any problems? Has there been any pushback and things you've had to redesign or address to improve?
Yeah, really good question. And the answer, it was an open question for us as well. But as I said before, people have kind of thrown themselves into it. I think we're very conscious in this forum. Obviously, we're talking about augmented reality. I've used the phrase several times, but to consumers and to shoppers, that language can be jarring. And actually, people use things like filters. Hundreds of millions of people every day around the world use camera filters, which is augmented reality, but it's not called that because that jars with people. So, we call our mode camera mode. And people don't bat an eyelid. It's just a way they can achieve a goal. So the framing of it is really important to shoppers, and the fact that it has to do something of value, so that they just naturally get on with it, rather than are told this is a new technology. It's more seamless than that is really important.
Yeah. And similarly, Karen, on the sort of privacy front, when you're talking about taking AI learnings from CCTV, there was a big furore from some sort of civil liberties groups years ago when CCTV was rolled out. What are some of the challenging questions that you get asked about your systems?
Mm-hmm. I have to kind of agree with Ben in terms of AI. It's one of those like with augmented reality, it's a bit of a jarring term, and a lot of people don't really know what it means. They have a kind of a more of a sci-fi understanding of it. Computer vision is even more confusing. So essentially what we really do is process data on behalf of a retailer. and our mode of doing it is a camera feed. We have worked with the Government Data Protection Inspectorate, and nothing goes live without their prior approval. So we do not track anybody. Everything is, all of our algorithms are basically trained on anonymized data, and all the video streams are thrown away immediately. We don't keep anything, and all the data belongs to the client from the moment it's generated, which is really key. And we have worked with the legal team since the product was launched. There is a quarterly review of our GDPR impact assessment. The product responds to ISO standards. So every client, we have to go through quite a rigorous GDPR checklist. And we always are able to get through that, because that's something we have taken as a very core of the product, is not to infringe on people's privacy. So even our gender prediction models are based on anonymized video feeds, which is very unique in the world. So rather than detect gender by face, we do it according to the silhouette of the person, and the accuracy is very high for that. So it is at the very core of the company.
And how quickly can you analyze data? Can it be done in real time? Does it have to be done 24 hours later?
Yeah, we do it in real time. Everything's done real time immediately. So like I mentioned, 20 seconds to get a camera set up. It takes you another 10 to already start seeing live data, generating reports, etc.
Right.
I must add a question in here. I mean, and speaking about privacy, one thing which is amazing is that we see that there's a growing demand for privacy, but not necessarily just GDPR. So the biggest question is, I guess, so one of them is consent. How do we make sure that we use someone's data only if he consented to it? And we see that the regulation is making it very hard. For example, we look at Wi-Fi triangulation was very popular in malls, and instantly overnight it became prohibited in a large variety of European countries. And the reason for that was in a way consent. My point is that this is an ongoing process. That I mean, all of us here on the tech side need to be A, cautious, but B, at every given moment, making sure that we can predict the next thing that comes out and find the relevant algorithms, relevant forms, relevant data transformation, etc., to make sure that we don't jeopardize that. It's also important on the business side. We see that on one hand, we have privacy expert, as Karen said, asking us endless questions. But it's amazing. The next step onwards, who are they? The communication people, wanting to make sure that they're buying data which won't lead to a scandal tomorrow morning. And that's part of a changing, completely changing with data. So it's an interesting game, but one that we need to keep our eyes open for.
I think one of the interesting tensions around privacy, completely agree with what you both just said there. It's going to be a huge issue, and will continue to be something that needs to be solved in different ways. But whilst it gets spoken about a lot, it doesn't seem to be something that consumers actively vote on with their feet very much. I think they still expect a much better experience that is enabled by sharing of data. And a lot of polling seems to suggest that people are quite comfortable sharing their data if they get requisite benefits in return. So I think the core of the issue, like you guys have touched on, is about that consent piece. As long as people are able to consent to giving it away and getting something in return, then and that's obviously a super simple summary of the situation, but it's the big picture seems to be that people would rather give it away or share their private data to get stuff in return than not.
Yeah, but it seems that it's now more on the regulation part. We've just seen a sue by one of the municipalities in the Netherlands for 600,000 euros. For a small company with privacy. So we also feel comfortable without having a seatbelt on when we drive. But I guess it's It's now on the regulation side and not really on the people side. So
I think we've developed that, it doesn't require consent. So that's one of the things that we hope will put us on, like you mentioned, Dan, ahead of the curve, because we just look at trends and it's impossible to identify an individual. And at the same time, the accuracy for all of the data we gather is over 98%. But again, consent's not required. So that's us trying to anticipate the next year's regulations in the EU, which will, we don't know what they'll throw at us actually.
Yeah, it depends what happens in practice as well, doesn't it? Because you can have the theory and have the regulations and the policy side, but also if a company has a really big embarrassing data breach, then that can put people off using that company, and also governments and how public authorities use data. We've got the UK Test and Trace NHS app here, and you have to register when you go to a venue, you go to a bar, a restaurant, you have to scan the QR code. And I regularly see people and know people that won't do that because they don't trust the government to get it right. And there's too many bad examples come out in the headlines in the newspapers of test and trace going wrong that they just go to the next bar where they can get away with it, or they pretend to check in on the thing. Natalia, you were going to come in there.
No, I was just going to say that although data protection is very important, I think it's probably will find its way through the regulations, and sometimes it does take time, and there's teething problems on both sides. And often retailers just have to be reactive, as I say, overnight regulation changes. But the retailers and the landlords also have to be proactive in trying to predict what's going to happen. And whilst the digital world is more mobile, the physical side of things, it still takes time just to build and alter. And what I'm was thinking is that, again, it should be some degree of flexibility in how spaces are created or retained. So there should be some sort of almost an empty or a space within each store or shopping center that could be tested for various uses, and data could and create sort of core attraction for the visitors. And then data would immediately, like in live terms, monitor the popularity of it and the effectiveness of it, or seasonal changes or whatever. And it's just, I think it's quite important to just allow life to happen and monitor it. And as designers, we would allow that in terms of spatial allowances and sort of signage, wayfinding as well. So I think it's looking into the future. That's the hardest bit, but it would be much more clear when you try things and test them straight away with data. And I think now with tech, that becomes more and more possible. So, and almost immediate. And that's also with something I mentioned earlier, the reduction of retail space, that's also possible. So you have that surplus space that actually is going to be a trend tester. So instead of a negative, it's become a positive as well. And or most importantly, it creates a sense of community, because for most people, shopping it's emotional experience. We buy online what we need most of the time, but we buy in physical stores what we want. It's a very different connection to the product. And it's this emotional ties. They would be supported by a sense of community or sense of place, a sense of belonging, and sometimes shopping may become actually secondary activity where you come for something else to the place, and then shopping is secondary but still happening, which is the most important thing for the retailers. I don't know if my other panelists have anything illustrative to support this, but I think that definitely cultural events overlaid with retail work really well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you've written extensively for us on PlaceTech before about the rise of possible new anchors, that if retail isn't the anchor, is it culture? Is it a theatre? Is it a public square with very good Wi-Fi where young people can meet and things like that? But any views from Dan? Have you seen the different uses, cultural overlaid with retail, of sort of success in some of the places that you monitor?
I'm not sure I understand the question, honestly.
So if you have cultural events that are happening in the arts or music and things like that, of how to get people back out and not just shopping online, and bring consumers in with different sort of anchors into destinations.
So unfortunately, no, we don't go into those details, and I wouldn't know what measures the retailers actually take to make something new and bring out more innovative or a constructive way of bringing people in. So I wouldn't know.
Okay, very honest. Thanks very much. And Ben, is that something you've looked to do with stores, of bringing in other experiences and bringing that emotional aspect in as well in terms of behavioral psychology?
Yeah, 100%. I think Natalia summed up really well there when saying e-commerce is, people buy what they need, and then store they buy what they want. I think, e-commerce is really, really good at the logistics side, at kind of getting you the thing exactly that you need. It's much less good at exactly the emotional side, the experience side, the service side, that kind of curation and tactile inspiration that people still really, really love about shopping. So that's a really big part of what retailers are trying to give their shoppers when they work with us. So it goes far beyond just meeting the needs of what they're looking to buy, and is a much broader experiential service overall.
Yeah. And Karen, would you say that from the people that you've worked with, that being an early adopter of tech can be an advantage? And how does that play out? Can they sort of stay out in front if they're using tech earlier than other property companies?
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to add to the previous point that, just like I mentioned in the beginning of the chat, once stores opened here and we could see this massive spike of women flocking to the shops, it was probably the same thing, just this emotional, I need to get out. So it was really interesting to actually witness in hard data as well, that's really something that happened. That online shopping doesn't cater for all of these needs at all. But in terms of advantages, of course. So once like Dan, you mentioned this guy who said, I know this by my gut feeling or whatever. I find it in a way odd, because how do you know how the next generation is shopping now? I mean, I don't know how 20-year-olds will shop, or how they will shop in 2 or 5 years. So that's something that you need to be backing up with the data, and understanding how interaction happens with mannequins or shop fronts. Are they even relevant? What's your conversion rate from the mall to the individual shop, to then actually the amount of buying customers, etc. It just gives you such an advantage in terms of tailoring your offer, and keeping that person there for longer, and making their kind of shopping journey, like you say, Ben, more tactile and meaningful, because people still miss variety. And I mean, we've had home improvements for 1.5 years now. It's just, we need to get out and kind of into the real world and spend time in places that we're used to doing it. And physical retail shopping will probably never disappear, but it will get more interactive and more interesting.
Yeah. And Dan, how important is open data and open systems, open APIs to connecting different systems with each other?
So it is very, very important, because there's so much going on. I guess a big new problem is, how do we deal with all the mass of everything that's going on, and how do we as a retailer bring it forward? How can we be in a position that we actually are able to consume the data, the images, the data created from the images, the data created from the cash registries, everything together into one point. And in a way, the faster we move in finding a way to collaborate and integrate the data, the easier it will be for us to systems within these up and going retailers. It's not an easy task. Many companies are trying to do it holistically for a generic solution for everyone. But one of the big, in a way, problems with data is that data speaks many different languages. And I guess that's one of the burning topics that we will now see escalating more and more on the innovative and startup side, and that's the ability to actually bring everything together and make sense into one. Definitely burning point on the customer side, both on the retail, on the asset, on the property managers. They're all looking to find a way to use the data, but to decrease the headache that data has created for them.
And where do you think we're going to end up in a couple of years' time? What would be your sort of big picture, blue sky thinking predictions for the customer experience in retail in 2025?
Number one is that privacy won't be a problem. It will be solved, either because people are willing to give it and they know what they're getting in return, but there won't be any hacks. People's privacy will be safe. That's number one. And then number two, I think the experience for all of us would be much better because we will get the right messages. We will find the relevant local stores around us, relevant to our shopping habits. We will go into a store and find the relevant product. I think it will be a much better procedure for us as consumers, for us as data providers, for us as retailers. We're now going into a few years of some hurdles, trying to make things sense of everything. But I envision a world where everything becomes much more easier, and in result, revenues will keep skyrocketing.
Sounds great. Same question to you, Ben. It's what's your sort of future gazing vision of retailing in the future?
Yeah, a couple of things on that. So I think we spoke a bit earlier about e-commerce and physical retail, and I think it can be easy to think about the future through those two lenses, but actually they're too simplistic, and there's a proliferation of different channels, click and collect. It's some of others that we've spoken about, and I think probably my most confident prediction would be that a better way to think about it is, was technology a central part of any buying experience or transaction, whether the person, bought it on their sofa or in store or somewhere in between on their phone, laptop, etc. I think technology is just going to play a role in almost every single purchase over the next few years, a central part. I think thinking more about physical spaces, I'm biased, but I do think not just retail, but almost every physical space will become, smart, so to speak, where someone can have, an essentially personalized journey and have that overlay of information that is relevant to them. I think depending on the exact year that you pick, 2025, that will still mostly be done via our smartphone. But actually, if you jump 5 years after that, it will mostly be done by glasses. And it's funny because if you look at what big tech, if your Apple and Facebook, the biggest investments they're making are in smart glasses, AR-enabled smart glasses. So the view of big tech is that is going to be the next major competing platform that's going to replace the smartphone. And I think that's going to have probably one of the biggest impacts on physical places that we've had in decades. It's going to totally change the way people interact with them. So I think that's coming. It's probably it's wave 2 rather than wave 1 over the next few years, but that's really where we're headed.
Yeah, and same question to you, Natalia, in terms of when hopefully you've repurposed and repositioned some of these department stores and high streets and centres. What do you think the future of consumption looks like in the physical world?
Well, it will still have a space for it, definitely, because Ben mentioned sofa. I think I just read about sofas units, retail units opening, because people want to try it. So there's still this. I don't think you can replace it with the image on your phone. So there will be some element of trying, testing, sort of experimenting, experiencing. So that would be definitely still there. I think other sectors of economy will reach for retail as a supplement for their offer. Say offices, no one knows what will happen with offices now. Everyone is just sort of wondering whether there's going to be a reduction in space, increase in space to make it more sparse. But attracting people back from their lovely homes to offices, or not so lovely, it depends, but it has to have some added elements that you can't have at home, retail being one of them. So if you walk into your office block and office building, and there is a pop-up offer somewhere on the ground floor, coffee or some independent traders, so all of that will sort of come together more close, and sort of retail itself can take advantage of other sectors, like mixing it with education, with again offices, with cultural uses. So I think I will see sort of modification, but there will be still physical retail, but maybe just as a part of bigger picture. I think more cohesive, more sort of together, more working as one element as a society. So I think that's just the whole world of morphing, blending boundaries is going to. I think.
Sure, as a holistic approach. Yeah, and last but not least, Karen, thoughts. I was just asking the guys about their sort of view of what retail and leisure will look like in 2025.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was kicked out twice from the platform. I have to chime with all of these opinions. The whole meshing of the physical world, digital world. There are some already shops which, when you go to it, you can pick up your kind of dry items and then pick out your own fresh foods, because that's something people really like to do. Probably some more move back into these micro shops, if you will. So rather than having to travel to a city center major mall, being able to get everything done near you, so that I guess maybe it's a bad term, but democratization space, if you will, so that it is really for you. You don't have to travel. It's accessible, easy. You can get just everything done near you. I'm hoping that maybe more independent retailers will pop up as well. Again, because of the new generations are not as loyal to kind of big brands as maybe older people have been. So it's hard to predict the future, but yeah, I have to agree with a lot of the points already said.
Yeah, no, some great ideas there, and thank you very much for sharing your insight. Yeah, thanks again to everyone that took part in that, and I hope you enjoyed watching wherever you are. Thanks to our partners, to Molcom and Bruntwood Works, for that session this morning, and we'll see you again at a PlaceTech event soon. Thanks all.